can also reaffirm that we will fulfill an important Conservative election pledge, cutting taxes for hard-working Canadian families.
All right, that was Joe Oliver, the Minister of Finance this week, talking tax cuts. In fact, the Conservatives have already delivered on one old promised tax break and are now hinting at least one new one. But could there be a stumbling block? The price of oil, the commodity that drives so much of Canada's economy. It was up a bit today, but it's a long way from where it was just a few weeks ago and where it has been for a few years. How does that factor into campaign promises for all parties? Chantal is in Montreal, Bruce is in Calgary, and Andrew is here in Toronto. Let's start in Calgary with Bruce. You know, some economists, some analysts already saying, just in the last 24 hours, that Joe Oliver and the government should rethink the tax cut pledge, and even Tom Mulcair should rethink the daycare promises he made this week. What's your sense on that?
Well, certainly if the oil price swoon and the stock market swoon continue for any extended period of time, Peter, I think it definitely changes the political stakes. For one thing, the government has spent a lot of time in the last couple of years talking about 2015 as the year when a balanced budget is achieved and tax cuts are possible, and they may have to revisit that a little bit. I also think the government has invested a lot in the notion of energy and energy exports, including to new markets, as a central part of their economic plan. And if it doesn't look as plausible because world prices are lower, then people are going to be looking at them and saying, what's plan B if that was plan A?
Chantal?
Well, it would stand to change the entire election conversation in the sense that all parties are getting ready to have a conversation about how we should spend the surplus. If that surplus doesn't materialize, or if it's almost an insignificant surplus and there's more uncertainty on the horizon than all of them expected, then you have a different kind of election campaign. And those platforms that they're working on at this point, a year from now, might not be good for the road, but we don't know that, and I don't think any party is going to correct course now.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's early going on this, although there has been a pattern set in, and you got to wonder. Andrew, where are you on it?
Well, as with my colleagues, we don't know is the short answer. It depends on how long this is sustained, and none of us can really predict the future on that. If it is sustained, it certainly has a very direct impact on the budgets of resource-producing provinces like Alberta, like Newfoundland. Less directly the hit taken at the federal level. I think the thing that more concerns me is where is that drop in oil prices coming? Part of that's from a huge increase in supply, particularly in the U.S., but part of it is reflecting a lower growth outlook in the rest of the world, in China and Europe in particular. And if that is sustained, that even though the United States seems to be doing relatively well, and that's our major trading partners, but over time, if we get a real blow up in Europe, for example, that could affect the overall economy in Canada, and you could well see a hit of several $1 billion to the bottom line federally from that. The long and the short of that is it shows how quickly these situations can change, how you can't bank on continued prosperity forever. And I'd certainly agree that some of this talk where we're, between the parties spending the surplus several times over, people need to cool their jets a bit.
Do we tend to place too much emphasis on that oil price, whether it's high or whether it's low, in terms of the impact it could have? Bruce?
Well, I don't know if the answer is that we place too much. I do think that that's been a big part of the political conversation. I think the Prime Minister has tried to talk about the larger economic context in the world a lot as well, and the uncertainty. And in the last little while, of course, people have been less convinced that the world is an uncertain and volatile place, up until really just the last month or so. With the arrival of that sense of the volatility in world economies, this might be a bit of a bonus for the government if it makes people say, you know what, now's not the time to look at a riskier or a different economic policy proposition.
Andrew?
It certainly changes the debate quite a bit. I don't think we're going to be hearing a lot about Dutch disease in the next little while, for example. Some of the interregional tensions and envies between the resource-producing provinces and the other provinces may diminish a little bit, and that might make the federal government's life a little bit easier in terms of having to mediate those tensions. So we can overplay it, but it certainly is part of our national debate.
All right. I want to move to topic 2 tonight, and it sort of suddenly came on the scene just really in the last few hours when Chatelaine put out its online version of what is going to be one of its major elements in its next edition. And it's an interview and discussion about the impact of Justin Trudeau. It's coming at the same time as a lot of things will be coming out for Justin Trudeau in the next little while. His autobiography comes out, I think, this weekend, and associated with that, a number of interviews that apparently have already been done and will come out at the same time as the release of the book, and some other magazine profiles. But this one's interesting because the social media attention it's been getting. Here's the kind of headline in it is Justin Trudeau the candidate women have been waiting for? He's pro-choice, says Chatelaine. Family first, hell-bent on engaging female voters in the next federal election. An exclusive look inside the Liberal leader's home and his political playbook. Some people have taken offense to the way this is being portrayed. Chantal, are they overreacting?
If you take just the definition of Justin Trudeau and leave out the name, they could be describing Jack Layton, right? There have been pro-choice parties on the ballot, the NDP to name just one, for a long, long time, so it's not a big discovery. I think up to a point the Liberal Party is a victim of timing. There's a long lead time for pieces like that. It was done, obviously, some time ago. That it comes out now, this week, at a time when there's a lot of criticism out there over lack of substance, perceived lack of substance on the part of the Liberal leader in the debate over the war on Islamic State, in a week when the NDP has come out and taken over the childcare issue. Possibly it makes that puff piece actually show some of the weaknesses of the Justin Trudeau image rather than show it up. And that was not the intention. And on its own, the piece reads like a great puff piece. But I don't think it has the impact that the Liberals might have wanted.
So some of those who've been upset about it are talking about the headline. You know, is Justin Trudeau the candidate women have been waiting for, kind of implying that, in fact, the answer to that is yes. That it's even asked, I guess, is why people are upset. Andrew?
Well, I think there was some miscalculation on both sides. I think the magazine, the writer, may have thought they were doing a kind of where they would deconstruct the fluff piece even as they were doing the fluff piece. I think the Trudeau people probably thought this would make him look warm and approachable, and instead it made him look kind of calculated, and the piece came off sounding kind of gooey. And of course, what they share is this, what the headline implies, is that there's a candidate that women, as a group, as a sex, have been waiting for, as if all women vote the same way, as if they all have the same view on abortion, among other issues, which is an unfortunate assumption, which nevertheless sometimes people get away with. And what strikes me about this, coupled with Mr. Mulcair's appearance on The Social, a program aimed largely at a female demographic on television, is here you have two white, male, middle-aged politicians going on TV and appealing, or in magazines, appealing to women voters on the basis of what? Mr. Mulcair talked about babies, about flowers, about fashion, about the love notes that he sends his wife every day.
He also
it was
talked
not
about
particularly substantive. It wasn't particularly substantive. And in another context, if you change the context by 1 degree, the same Liberal and NDP partisans who would ferociously descend on any other politician for patronizing or condescending or stereotyping women gave these a pass. I watched The Social, and I agree that it's not the most serious format that Thomas Mulcair has gone to, but he did go there to talk about something that the women in the audience reacted to, and it was not that his wife calls him Mona for mon amour, or that he dislikes socks with sandals, but it was for his proposal for a childcare program. And while not every woman wants her child in childcare, most of them probably would like some help with childcare arrangements when they're juggling family and work, and it seemed to be the reaction of the audience. So I wouldn't call that appearance just fluff, look how nice I can be and my wife likes me.
All right, I want Bruce's thoughts on this too, but first let me remind you that Chatelaine has done takeouts on other leaders over the years, going back many, many years. In fact, I saw Evan Solomon holding up a 30 or 40-year-old magazine article on Margaret Trudeau, the woman or the girl who caught the Prime Minister's eye. That was the cover story then. But look at this from 7 years ago. This is what they did on Stephen Harper. At home with the Harpers, Prime Minister Stephen Harper and his wife Lorraine opened the doors of 24 Sussex to Chatelaine for an exclusive visit and a photo op with their family. So the Justin Trudeau spread is hardly the first time a political leader has had this kind of attention from Chatelaine. But one wonders, is the controversy, is it about Justin Trudeau or is it about Chatelaine? Bruce?
Well, I guess since this article just came out, I want to withhold comment a little bit until I hear from more women. I know that some who've read it, it's an article that's obviously written for a female audience. I'd like to hear from more women before I decide whether or not I think on the whole it's been more offensive or been somewhat helpful to them. But I would say this, I think there's two things here. One is the choices that Justin Trudeau made, and the other the choices that Chatelaine made. And insofar as agreeing to do a profile piece like this, I don't think there was anything wrong with Mr. Trudeau's choice. The choices that Chatelaine made, some of the adjectives that they used, probably none of us would ever want to have those kinds of adjectives used in a piece describing us. So I think they are a bit awkward. I think they also, as Chantal said, and I think maybe this is the most important point in my view, which is that you can't read this article in the wake of the decision that Mr. Trudeau took on the involvement in Iraq the same way that you would if he'd taken a different decision. You just have this feeling of somebody whose judgment and maturity is under more pressure because of that decision, and therefore these articles read a little bit differently.
I think there's another issue, which is that part of his appeal is that he is quote-unquote spontaneous and authentic, and he's not hidebound the way traditional politicians are, and there's some truth in that. But if you watch some of the outtakes or the asides in that article, and if some of the other things that have come to light, he's very, very concerned, more so even than your average politician, about how this will look, how it plays, will this cut just the right kind of jaunty air. And up to a point, people will find that appealing, and past a certain point, I think it might look a little bit too calculated.
All right. Time for one other quick topic. And I find this interesting because everything we see from all the three leaders, or all the leaders in Parliament over this next year is going to be weighed and looked through the prism of the upcoming election. This is an announcement put out by the Prime Minister's office this afternoon about his schedule for tomorrow. Here it is, 11:30 tomorrow morning in Sault Ste. Marie. The Prime Minister will participate in a moderated question and answer session with Angelo Lombardo, the Executive Director of the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters. He's going to have a couple of his MPs with him from that particular area around Sault Ste. Marie. Now, you look at that and you go, okay, he's going to Sault Ste. Marie. That's who he's going to be with. He's going to do a Q&A session. Why is he going there? What's the importance of that? And what can you take away from it? Bruce, you've been looking at those writings.
Yeah, I guess I look at where he's going not from so much the standpoint of the subject that he's going to talk about, although I'm sure he will be of interest to the anglers and the hunters that he meets with, but more the fact that two of the ridings, I think, represented by the MPs that he's going to be with, were ridings that the Conservatives won by pretty narrow margins in the last election. And so you've got the situation where the leader of the government party is saying, we've got to go and try to shore up our situation in those ridings. I'm sure he'll be campaigning in ridings that they don't hold, but as for right now, tomorrow, this looks like an event that's designed to shore up ridings that he feels might be under some threat.
Chantal?
Well, don't forget that one of the reasons why the Conservatives won narrowly those ridings was thanks to the gun control debate, which is now basically gone away in the sense that none of the opposition parties is saying if we win, we're going to restore the gun registry. So I'm sure that Mr. Harper is in part going there and to that audience to remind the people there of the good services of the Conservatives to those who oppose the gun registry, a big issue for years in those ridings, and to try to glue that vote together in the absence of the best glue that they ever had, which was the gun registry.
Andrew?
Yeah, it's partly the local thing that Bruce was identifying. I think it's also the content and reminding, as Chantal says, people, in the hunting community, if I can call it that, gun owners, et cetera, who's on their side, who has their backs, who's part of their identity group. So much of our politics is about who am I and who stands for me, who sides with me, and this is part about if you think of yourself primarily in political terms as a gun owner or as a rural person who city folk just don't get, who condescend to, who look down their noses at, then this is helpful in reminding them of that.
All right, good discussion. And it's important for all of us to keep an eye on where all the leaders go, because there's a reason behind it as to why they're going, and that was a good breakdown of that particular one. Bruce in Calgary tonight, Chantal in Montreal, Andrew here in Toronto.